Good afternoon, everyone. As a second magnetic field forms in our outer solar system, those gas giants are going to couple with each other, creating a secondary magnetic field torus wave. Now we have the sun, and now we're going to have a second magnetic field tugging on both sides of the Earth, creating an ellipsoid. The crust is going to start breaking and shaking. Perhaps this is the catalyst for the Grand Solar Minimum, that every time we see one of these events, governments change, population moves, and the economy is reset. Oh, just in time for the Davos agenda. Great reset. Level 2 lockdowns. If COVID wasn't enough to stop travel, UK, 1,750 pounds now of your own money to sit in their facility for 10 days to test negative before they let you in the country. The true lockdown has begun. Along with the earth changes, you're going to be looking for these specific types of events: more intense earthquakes and landslides, earth cracks, and jet streams bringing unusual temperatures that can't be explained to different parts of our world. I'm all one for coincidences, but the intensification of the Grand Solar Minimum, the apex of this planetary alignment in October of 2024, 3 years countdown to this, and suddenly the Great Reset's here. The population is absolutely being locked down. Where you are is where you stay. No more travel. The economy is being reset. Food prices are going to skyrocket when these jet streams continue to affect global food production. And you can see how the access to food's already being put in place, drip fed. Want to go into a supermarket? You have to do certain things now. Wait till food becomes guarded for you to enter the purchase point. Let's take a look at what's happened in the last couple of weeks and try to wrap this into a larger picture, what we can see moving forward from now to 2024. The last time we had a Democrat-led Congress and president was during the first years of the Obama administration. Janet Yellen was the Fed chair then, and now soon to be the new Treasury Secretary under Biden. Obamacare was passed. President Obama and Congress sent billions to banks and Wall Street. That was the perfect recipe, and gold soared more than 200% from 2008 to 2011. We know Joe Biden is well versed in the Obamonomics, and raising taxes was the centerpiece of the campaign. History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Patriot Gold Group has the no-fee-for-life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no-fee-for-life IRA. So go ahead and give the folks at Patriot Gold Group a call to discuss physical gold and silver. And the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer 5 years in a row from 2016 till present. Click the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video. And for those of you first joining this channel, thank you very much for tuning in. The reason we're seeing so many anomalies, not only in society, but also with the climate, is this repeating cycle in time, a grand solar minimum. The sun goes into a low activity state, and one of the main things is lack of global food production, and what you think is stable food production drops off a cliff. Not enough food for the global populace. If it is, it's at bare rations. Society resets anyway. Now looking back at 1650 to 1700, you can see the enormous amount of change that occurred across our planet. Back then, there were less than 1 billion people. Fast forward to now, 8 billion people. Governments are going to have to react. They're going to have to control the citizens before the citizens get unruly due to food pricing, food unavailability, and just not being able to live lives because everything's so incredibly expensive that they're going to demand change. Remember back to 2019? I doubt anybody really does. There were 22 countries at the end of 2019 asking for change in the way that the central banks operated in their countries and the way that the populace of these nations on the streets, hundreds of millions of people on the streets. Remember that at the end of 2019, 22 nations daily demanding change in the way that the monetary system operated and the government oversight and the way that the workings of the nations needed to change. And then suddenly, whoosh, the bug enters and all the street protests stopped instantly. Wasn't that magical the way it happened? Control mechanisms are inbound here. So in my estimation, governments are going to take the bulls by the horn this time because they understand these repeating cycles in time, meaning that citizens are going to the streets and demanding change, not just about the money, which a lot of people saw through the illusion in 2019 and demanded change. This will be about, I can't eat, my family's not eating, food prices are too expensive, and what we're seeing now is a triple whammy of rising food prices, rising gasoline prices, and at the same time rising utility prices as we get into these freeze events that are happening across the planet. What would you do if you were a government leader? Would you tell the people the truth or would you try to control them? Because hungry people you just don't know what their actions are going to be. They have nothing left to lose when they're starving. Hence, all of the pre-controls being put in place now to allow you to access food, to lock you down, lock the food down before anything gets really out of hand. Then it's much more controlled. And going into this, what would be an uncontrollable situation, suddenly there's a playbook for it and everything has levels of control in it. This is the future. This is why the Great Reset's happening. This is why you're demanded to jump through hoops and hurdles to get into the supermarkets right now. 2022 is really going to be where things have shifted so greatly. So look at the amount of change that's happened in just a single year. Now, it's going to intensify as these Grand Solar Minimums, the jet streams, and all these other events globally here with our climate system and just the Earth's crust itself start to go so far out of kilter, out of the possibilities of norm. A lot of people are going to start to ask questions, and once they do, we're going to have another similar 2019. A lot of people questioning, but you're not going to be allowed on the street. No. Distance. And you can see how it's a bit different change right now. Expect it. Let's look at some of these changes. So if we go back in longer periods of time, you can see that every time there's a significant drop in global temperatures, there's been a reset for the society. You can look back through history, there's thousands of examples. What's the reason that these societies reach this greatest apex of technology, art, mathematics, military, food production, and then they just collapse overnight? And it's a repeating cycle. Well, these 400-year solar cycles are the catalyst for those changes. These 400-year solar cycles can lump into a larger cycle. 5 of these on top of each other are a grander cycle, and that's where we're heading right now, once in a 2,000-year event. So the fingerprints of the Grand Solar Minimum, as I call it, are these 3 things that happen every Grand Solar Minimum. The governments know it. The citizens demand change because the government can no longer meet the basic needs. The population then moves because they either can't grow food or life is inhospitable enough where they move to a different place. And then the economic disarray and reset also occurs. Are you seeing any of these things happen right now? And this is the mechanism right here. We have these 4 gas giants that form in one quadrant of the solar system. Now this time around, this almost perfect configuration of a square in the outer solar system was seen last time in 79 AD. And what seems to happen is the Jovian planets, Jupiter and Saturn leading the charge there, have their magnetic fields couple into a much larger torus field in itself. So now we have a second magnetic field out in the outer solar system along with the sun. Normally we only have one large magnetic field in the solar system. Now we're going to have 2. And keep in mind the outer solar system magnetic field is going to be lighter compared to what our sun is going to be, but it's a second magnetic field. And what will happen is the Earth will be between these 2 magnetic fields. It's going to create something called an ellipsoid Earth. Now, the top 1 mile of the crust, in my estimation, is going to be the change point. So what we're going to start to see is a lot more landslides and volcanic eruptions, earthquakes. Jet streams are going to really start to get bent out of shape because the magnetic field is what holds the jet streams in place on our planet with our own magnetosphere here on Earth, our own magnetic field. So imagine how our magnetic field is going to be affected by a second magnetic field forming right in the middle of 2 large magnetic fields. And then the jet streams going out of their normal flows, we're going to see decreased crop yields. Again, that brings us back into social instability because people can't eat. And we'll look at a few of the Earth changes in just a second, but isn't it just such coincidental timing that I'm showing you these timelines heading into all these Earth changes based on science, repeating cycles, and suddenly we got the Davos Great Reset agenda. Right here, right now, at the exact same time is too coincidental for me to believe it's random. I'm saying that this bunch of global elite that you're looking at here in the slide understand and have the knowledge of these cycles, and this time they're trying to buck history by creating the changes before the changes organically arise. Now, perhaps they tried the same thing in the 1600s. Remember, victors write history, and what we have for history from the Maunder Minimum is a narrative from one side only. And the further back you go in history, it gets a little murkier. But this whole thing about the January 25th to 29th World Economic Forum meetings this time was about the coming economic collapse, debt, and hyperinflation, as well as preparing for food shortages. Wow, they talked about it in their meetings. What do you think is going to happen out here? So the level 2 lockdown has in earnest begun, and since the beginning of my channel, I was always saying that they would lock down the planet 1 year before the food shortages started because they would need to control the chaos, and that would be the very first signal that when this comes in truly, the lockdown, you have 1 year or less, and here we are. This is level 2 lockdown. I believe this is the actual start from this point. We have less than 1 year now before global food shortages are in. And what's going on across the world at the moment with these temperatures and broken jet streams is just validating this. So travelers in the UK, when you fly to the UK, you're going to have to quarantine for 10 days, and you're going to have to pay £1,750 out of your own pocket to do so. And children, they only have to pay £325. So generous. Now, the UK is going to start this trend, but watch the rest of the world. It's going to follow, just like the whole reset's happening. One country starts it, the rest of it follows. So this is now a taxed lockdown to prevent you from traveling anywhere. So once it sweeps across the nation, and every nation has its different fee for coming into the place, what if you want to travel to 2 or 3 nations on a trip? You're going to be spending $6,000 just to spend 10 days in each country. Travel will be an impossibility at that point on purpose. So if you're going to head over to the UK, you're going to have to get a negative test, you're going to have to quarantine in the hotel, you have to stay in your room, and all this has to be done before you travel, and then if you pop positive, you have to stay for another 10 days and pay another £1,750. So that's on the societal edge of things, but it's what's happening out that we're seeing. The Texas electrical shortages spreading across the southeast U.S. and different areas in the United States. These temperatures are unprecedented. It's 55 degrees below the normal temperature in Texas. Well, they've done away with a lot of their power plants and relying on renewables, windmills, etc., and that's just not enough for the demand. So they're going completely grid down. I think there was 8 million people now without power. But these types of jet stream anomalies are going to become the norm from this point. So that second magnetic field actually in earnest started with a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. All familiar with that in the solstice of last year, that was the rollover point when that magnetic field is intensifying every single day from this point forward to 2024. So when we're looking at Canada, which is an enormously cold place anyway in the wintertime, you're looking at new monthly records, second coldest February temp ever recorded, all-time cold records tied and broken, monthly records set for coldest ever. And we're talking about Canada. That should go, whoa, what's going on there? Snow was supposed to be a thing of the past, was it not? Then looking down in the first days of what was the power outages, you see that green goes off the chart there into 50, 55 degrees below normal temperatures. And you can see what such a swath that is. And over in Europe, they had the same exact thing happen. They call it a beast from the east, massive record cold, massive snow dumps, right on top of all the solar panels. German fail. They went into brownouts and electrical problems as well. And up in the Scandinavian countries, to get some sort of production back online, they ended up using helicopters to de-ice the blades with the same that they would do to de-ice aircraft wings. And as we swing into the summer as well, the opposite season is going to be just as brutal. But they're going to be blaming everything across the news media on the gas. You the human. They're never going to put the causation of the sun, second magnetic field forming, and these cycles on multi-centuries that are affecting our climate. It's going to be you. And the extremes we're seeing now with this cold, 50 degrees below the normal temperatures, it's going to swing over in the summertime to be just as brutal with the equatorial vortex. So expect massive extremes happening in both seasons. But for me, I'm really wondering what's going to happen in the periphery when we're changing from one season to the next. Because this is the first extreme year that we're coming into in terms of, you thought everything else was extreme before this. No. This is not even remotely close to extreme. What we're seeing now with this polar vortices, that's an extreme. All these earth slips, earth slides, that's extreme. When we come into the summer, it's going to be just as extreme, but on the heat side. But these colliding air masses coming in and out of the seasons, I'm really curious what's happening then. So in addition to the jet streams moving into new areas and bringing extremes that you didn't think were possible, since the Earth's crust being pulled into that ellipsoid, at the top mile is where you're looking in the crust. Top mile, mile and a half, you're going to start to see an enormous amount of crustal deformity and crustal anomalies. A huge, gigantic amount of upticks in earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. And all you're seeing across the news right now, and this is just from the beginning of February alone, major swarms of earthquakes all the way down to Australia, New Zealand, New Caledonia, across up through Papua New Guinea, Asia, off of Japan again, 7.1. Even Antarctica having 7.0, and they had 30,000 earthquakes last year at the end. And these landslides are another indicator. Not only the avalanches, obviously, because there's a lot of snow, but the landslides themselves are being upticked 10, 20x over the normals. And in the U.S., you can see how many avalanches there were, the most in more than 100 years this year. As well, this landslide/avalanche in India that came down and destroyed a bunch of hydroelectric projects, that was a landslide first that destabilized that glacier that then rolled downhill. I cannot believe it. People are saying, oh, the glacier was melting. Wait a second. It's in the middle of the Himalaya at 17,000 feet in the middle of winter at high elevation. Nothing's melting for 3 more months. Come on, please. And we saw this in Israel as well, where smoke and the sidewalks started melting. Here's a second, Philippines. The ground is just starting to steam. But it was interesting, it happened in Israel last month, but there's no volcanoes that were becoming active in Israel. Here in the Philippines, yeah, you can understand. It just means volcanoes are becoming more active in areas and starting to show again. Azerbaijan, this is one of the most active mud volcanoes on the planet, but this was one of the largest eruptions since 1810 in this same area here. Covered a little over 6 acres in this eruption. There's a couple videos coming out, and I would have loved to have been there to be able to film this. But this is what you're going to start to see. More geysers, more mud volcanoes, different crustal slips, landslides. And with the jet streams going out of flow, you're going to expect, beyond the cold, just things that don't make sense. Rare snowfalls in Malibu, California. It was just coincidental that NOAA added another whole band up to the arc storm classifications 2 years ago. Oh, wait, and then we just had a new band of arc storm intensity this year. Wow, they were so prophetic. They must have had a crystal ball. We got the ice storms, snowstorms in Saudi Arabia covering the deserts, all the snow across the Sahara in the north, up in Tunisia, record snows in Morocco, and it just keeps rolling on and on. You got the Saharan dust storms. But something really beautiful here, speaking of geysers, ice geysers now forming. When the water erupts out, it freezes. And I linked everything in the description box below so you can check out this amazing footage here of the ice geysers, as well as links to everything I've talked about in the story here. These changes are real. The changes are here. The Great Reset is part of this. And I hope this gave you a greater kind of connection between all these events happening on the planet. It's not just a random thing happening. It's all connected. Now, with all these changes coming in, I would highly suggest storing some food. Long-term storable food, 20-year shelf life, 2-week or the 4-week emergency food supply. My Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030. That link's in the description box below. They also have 6-month and 1-year storable food packs. Give a look there. They also have water filtration and a few other things that you might need in your preparedness for these changing times. Now, the climate's going to restabilize around 2032, 2033, something like this. So it's just these next 10 to 12 years, you're going to be more on your own. You're going to have to be more self-sufficient. You're going to have to learn pioneering skills. That's going to be the key to survival. because you're pretty much going to be left on your own. There's going to be so much chaos going on. I wish you the best. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.